Hi and welcome. Last weekend I have been to an Action store with my daughter because we needed some frames and I wanted to buy some blank greeting cards, and I found this art journal and I thought I will pick one up and try this out because the paper in it was quite thick. And I thought, even if the paper is no good, because the price point is around, I think, about €3 here in Germany. Even if the paper is not good, I can use it for collage. It's similar to that Ranger Dylusions Sketchbook. It has this little envelope on the inside, which is glued down a little bit off center. I don't mind that. The paper itself is, it has on one double spread, it has a texture which looks a bit unnatural to me, not my favorite texture. The other spread is smooth paper, so it alternates. I think that's quite lovely. And I already tried how pencil would work in this because I thought maybe I would use it not as an art journal, more as a sketchbook to go out sketching, because I really like the format. The only thing I don't like is that white of the paper and those textured sides. But I just wanted to experiment how the paper works, and I'm quite impressed. It's not porous, it does not soak up the mediums, which I really like. And here I tried a watercolor pencil, and this is a distress crayon, which blends amazingly. Also the colored pencil works perfectly, and I will just quickly try it out with some watercolor, because what I don't like when I go sketching is when the watercolor sinks into the paper. I like it to have it on top of the paper so I can move it around a little bit. And that's also really awesome. I really like that. And as I said, the only thing I don't like as a sketchbook is the color of the paper. It's so white. It's almost a cool white, not warm, more gray, I would say, from my feeling. And that's what I don't like. But I'm really excited to use this as an art journal, and I will think about maybe buying another one for sketching. I am now going to start my first page, and I want to keep this spread a little bit more beginner friendly. So in case you are starting out with art journaling and you don't have that many supplies, I'm using the distress crayons today. If you don't have these, it's not a problem. You can use any water-soluble crayon you have. For example, the Neo Colors, the Dina Wakley Scribble Sticks, any water-soluble wax crayon from your kids. The Faber-Castell Gelatos will work. And there are some cheaper versions of these gel water-soluble crayons out there, which work like the distress crayons. All these kinds of mediums will work, and you can create something really similar. The papers I've used for the background collage are mainly old book papers, and here is a piece of scrapbooking paper, and I also have some stationery papers that I got in a stationery shop, which was a mixture of different vintagey small bits of papers, and these are also nice for background collage. Finally, I would say you can use any kind of paper here. I would recommend using some neutral ones because I plan to make it more colorful later with the crayons. I'm adhering the papers with my glue stick, and I can keep my center empty because I plan to adhere a big center piece later in the process. I'm now going through my stash and have a look which papers will fit my background. As I said, I wanted to make it more light and neutral, not too many contrasting stuff and no colors at this stage. In case you are from Germany and you're watching this, I have a German YouTube channel and I have uploaded that same video over there with kind of, I made that live, I would say, not really live, but I talked through the process, and it's a bit longer than the English version because I'm talking a little bit more about that journal and all that kind of stuff. So if you prefer this, I would recommend jump over to my German YouTube channel. I'm speeding up the collage process now so you don't get bored. I'm done with this layer now, and what I plan to do, I want to adhere a big circle of a colorful paper into the center of the page and then create a focal image on top of that circle. And I have to say, so far I'm very impressed of this journal. I love it. I love the size of it. I love the thickness of the paper, and I think it's amazing for the price point. So I'm definitely sure I will grab some more. Here's a quick comparison to that original Ranger sketchbook, which I love. I use it for sketching and for drawing, not for journaling, because the paper is amazing. It's a little bit bigger, not much, than that one from the Action. And this one is, I believe, about 20 euros compared to around 3 euros. Yeah, so for a beginner, I totally can recommend this one. I have now some of my leftover paint papers here where I want to cut the circle from. And these paint papers I get when I paint something with acrylics or I'm cleaning brushes on these papers. Here I made a paper palette, a paint palette, and I tried out different paints and I had so much left over. I just smeared them onto the paper, and I plan to use these crayons, and I'm now going through my leftover paint papers to see which one I wanted to use on this spread. I'm speeding this part up again because my original video was 45 minutes almost, and that's so long, and that makes it a little bit shorter. Finally, I decided to pick this green one, and what I'm going to do now is I'm thinking about which area I wanted to have on my page, and then I am going to draw a circle and cut that piece out, and then I will see how it fits my spread. I will draw directly on the color side, and I'm just using a white color pencil. You will find a blog post over on our shop blog for this art journal page, and I will give you the link in the video description, and there I have, of course, some close-up images so you can have a closer look onto the art journal page. I really like that. I'm just thinking about to cut it a little bit smaller, and I'm not sure on which side I should cut something away. I feel that white element is a little bit centered, so maybe I will cut it so that one shifts a little bit. I also tried to turn the circle around to see how this looks, but I didn't like it. I think this is the perfect direction. I will just cut away a little bit of that circle, and I don't mind if my circle is not perfectly round. If you wanted to have a perfectly round circle, you can use maybe a little bowl or something like that, or a dish to find the perfect circle and then draw a circle on your paper. That might work as well, but I think it looks a bit more natural when it's not 100% perfect circle. I'm going to adhere this one as well with my glue stick, and then I will cover the whole spread with a layer of clear gesso. And that's what I think is something you maybe need when you start out with art journaling, is some kind of gesso. I would recommend getting a clear one and a white one. I think that's something you can use quite often, and you will use quite often. Especially if you have a white gesso and you don't have acrylics, you maybe can ink the white gesso with some stamping re-inkers to just make it a little bit colorful. And the clear gesso is a very nice medium to cover every kind of paper, not important if it's a good quality or bad quality paper, and it brings you a great surface to work on top with all kinds of mediums. Today I'm trying out a new clear gesso. Previously I've used the PBO transparent gesso, which is perfect, and that Liquitex one was reduced, and that was the reason I bought it, because I wanted to try that out, if it has the same finish as the PBO. And what I like about that Liquitex is that it comes in a bottle and not in a big jar, because I find it really hard to open that big jar, although I always take care that the edges are clean of that jar, and it still is so hard to open it. I'm just applying the gesso with a silicone brush. Of course, it's not necessary to have this one. It's just a nice handy tool. As an alternative, I can recommend a usual dough scraper that you can buy for your kitchen. I'm just removing the over amount of gesso with that scraper tool here, and that also presses down the papers a little bit more. I will now let my page dry completely, and then I will be back and we are going to create the final page. My page is dry and the gesso is perfect. It's similar to the PBO. The texture is very nice. It has kind of a grip to take all kinds of mediums, and that's what I love. I'm now going in with the Distress crayons, and I'm just dipping my finger into water to blend them out. And as I said in the beginning, you can use any kind of water-soluble medium here. Even watercolor pencils will work in a similar way. The colors I'm using are picked raspberry, abundant coral, crushed olive, cracked pistachio, and I think I'm using black soot and nothing else. I will also write you the colors in the video description. With these crayons like the Distress crayons or the Gelatos, and also the Neo colors or Stabilo Woodies, I feel that you have to take care not to mix the wrong colors together. So don't mix complementaries. Stay in the same family when you are mixing, because they quite quickly turn into a muddy gray brownish color, and I try to take care not to mix them too much, and especially not to mix the wrong colors together, because I don't want to create a muddy look. I now want to let that circle pop up from the page, and therefore I'm using the black soot crayon, and I draw a circle around the circle, a frame around my circle. Usually I think I wouldn't have used that crayon. I would have used a usual black watercolor pencil, and I would have dipped the nib into water, and then I would have drawn my circle. The reason is it has a bit more of a finer tip and it's easier to work with. But as I said, I try to use not too many different mediums, as this should be a beginner-friendly art journal page. So if you are starting out, it should be possible for you to recreate something similar. I will now, while this is drying, stamp my main images, and I'm going to stamp flowers from our Pencil Marks number 7 stamp set, and I am stamping them to the Canson Mix Media paper. It's one of my favorite papers for stamping, as it's very smooth and it's not too thick but not too thin, so it could be cut out quite easily, and it takes watercolors quite well. So I'm stamping with VersaFine Clear ink, as I'm stamping on paper. If I would stamp on an acrylic surface, I would stamp with StazOn, because it dries much quicker than the VersaFine Clear does. But the VersaFine Clear is not sticky, and it gives you a better stamp impression. And it's also waterproof once it's dry. And what I'm also doing is I'm laying a piece of foam underneath my paper so the stamp can sink into it and give me even a better impression. As I'm working on a glass plate, this is quite useful. I'm stamping so many of the flowers because then I have them already stamped for a future project, and I don't have to do this again. Yeah, you don't have to stamp so many. If you don't have any stamps, you can simply draw your own flowers. I let the stamping ink dry a little bit because it takes a bit of time, and in the meantime I have prepared some Tombow markers which I want to use to color in my stamped images. You don't need these Tombow markers to color them in. You can use any kind of medium. You can color in with watercolor pencils, with watercolors, with colored pens from your kids, yeah, all that kind of stuff. You don't need anything fancy. I'm not very good in coloring in stamped images. I prefer to work more loosely because I have the feeling the more I want to make it perfect, the less perfect it gets. So I'm on that quick and loose coloring side. I think I will now speed up that part again because it will be quite boring. Watch me coloring in stamped images. I will cut out these flowers off camera, and then I can use them on my art journal page. And here I just quickly cut a mask from a piece of scrap paper because I wanted to add some stamping around the circle, and I don't want to stamp into the circle. And the stamp comes with the same stamp set as the flowers, and I picked a pink StayZone ink and I just randomly stamped this image around the circle. Here I've messed it up a little bit, but I don't really mind. It's just to bring in some texture to the background. I also wanted to make some black splatters to bring in a little bit more of that black onto the outside of the circle, and here I'm using acrylic ink for that. If you don't have acrylic ink, you can use that crayon in black, mix it with water and then sprinkle it onto the page, or you can use acrylic paint and thin it down with water. I'm going to let the splatters dry, and in the meantime I had time to cut out the flowers, and I'm just arranging them to my page. I decided to pick only two because I think that looked a bit better, and I'm going to put them off center to the left side and maybe then put kind of a sentiment onto the right. I will glue them down and then see how it fits. First, I'm going to draw a stamp for each flower, and I'm using that black crayon again. Whilst I was drawing the stems, I thought it might be nice to have also some leaves going with the flowers. And there is a nice bold stamp in the same stamp set, and I thought I wanted to use it at the bottom of the circle. And therefore I use a mask, and I will just use that piece where I've cut the circle out and lay it on top of my page so I don't stamp to the outside of the circle. As the paper is quite textured, it's not possible to get a super perfect stamp impression, but that's not what I wanted. I just wanted to add in more interest and texture. Here I accidentally inked up my stamp with the wrong ink. I picked VersaFine, but as I'm working over acrylic, I recommend using StayZone because that dries on an acrylic surface super quickly compared to the VersaFine, which maybe will not dry, and also compared to archival, which takes some time to dry. So as a beginner, I would not recommend getting cheap stamp pads because usually they do not do a good job and they run out of ink quite quickly. I would recommend starting with black ink maybe, or maybe some of your favorite colors, and then picking StayZone if you plan to stamp a lot over acrylics, and or pick VersaFine Clear when you want to stamp onto paper and color in with watercolor mediums. If you want to color in with alcohol markers, you have to use, I think, the Memento ink. I do not often do this because it's alcohol based. No, it's water based and does not mix with alcohol markers. So yeah, that's the difference. So for a beginner, you maybe want to go with just StayZone because it's also waterproof. So it just is a little bit harder to stamp with it, I feel. I'm now going to adhere my flowers. I'm just using some simple wet glue. It works a bit better than a glue stick because the flowers have some sort of thicker paper than the collage papers were. And I'm going to press them down a little bit longer than you can see it here. My flowers are sticking well, and I decided to stamp a sentiment onto the inside of my circle by bending that stamp on an acrylic block, and then I plan to stamp it here. I can tell you now that I completely messed this up, but these kind of things happen when you're playing in your journal, and I think it's something people might be afraid of, especially when you're starting out in your art journal, that you mess up a page and then there is one page that doesn't look good. I understand that, but I have to say, don't care. It's just a creative play and you can always fix the issues. Even if you would glue something on top, that would be a solution for it. So don't be afraid, just create and play. I try to rescue that area or that sentiment by scribbling in more of that black. Finally, I was not able to read what I have stamped, so I'm going to cover that up with some scribbly marks I'm going to make with a watercolor pencil. And here I'm using a black watercolor pencil. I dip the nib into water to make the pigment run quite intense, and I'm just scribbling some words so that no one can read them onto the inside of the circle over that stamped image. And just to balance everything out, I decided to do the same on the outside on the left of my circle. So this is also quite useful to have a black watercolor pencil, because you can also use it to create interesting marks on your art journal pages, not only scribbling. What I now wanted to have are some white splatters just in the center circle, a little bit here, to break down that big green area. And therefore I'm using acrylic ink again in white. If you don't have acrylic ink, you can use white gesso or white watercolor, thin it down with water, and then use this. And I think I will give you also a demo here how to use that black crayon to make some splatters. And this is how you can use that crayon if you don't have black acrylic ink. Just scribble it onto your surface. It should be a glass or craft mat, and then mix it with water. It will work quite nice. What doesn't work is the white crayon. Usually all these white crayons don't have enough pigment to get a really opaque color. It will give you just some milky water, I would say. Yes, and that was my spread for today. I hope you enjoyed it and it was helpful that we tested this art journal. I wish you a lovely rest of the week, and I hope we will see us next time. Bye!